I believe that what is being done to Detective Bruce and what is being done in terms of stopping investigations, criminal police investigations into the potential harms of these vaccines, I believe that this case, Detective Bruce, is probably the most important case in law enforcement in Canadian history for 100 years. I do believe that, and I believe you'll see why. One of the big things I remember is when the commissioner of the RCMP, our National Police Service, Brenda Luckie, there was that mass murder where the man dressed as an RCMP officer down in Nova Scotia. And in the middle, early in that investigation, Commissioner Luckie called the homicide officers and asked them to release information about what kind of firearms were used, and this is almost a quote, to further the government's political agenda. So we had the highest police officer in the land of our National Police Service corruptly inserting a political agenda into a homicide investigation, mass murder, that had just gotten started. People are afraid of police now, and is it any wonder? If you have to worry about what you say and think in public, is this Canada? We are close, I have said, and this is my opinion, that we are not only on the threshold of a police state, we've crossed that threshold. When the police, in order to punish political opponents of the government, contact the banks, freeze accounts, wiretap the families of good, decent Canadians, we're here. We're here. We have, I don't know how we take it back. We are here. Canadians are not violent people. I expect that there will be all sorts of efforts to regain municipal politics, provincial, federal. There will be a walking away from certain institutions, parallel economies. We see these things happening. You asked me about revolution and such. I think the biggest revolution is to not comply. When they drag pastors out of their churches in front of their screaming children while the liquor store is open across the street. When Adamson's Barbecue in Toronto, they sent the police unit in there, basically trampled the people who were waiting to buy a sandwich, dragged them away, but Costco was open down the street, and Walmart was open the other way. And you had to wear a mask if you stood up going into a restaurant, but when you sat down, you could take it off because there's no virus there. I guess just like there was no virus in the liquor store, but there was in the church, obviously. But this is just insanity. And I think somehow people have realized that. I wonder if they would be able to impose such things on us again. Well, they won't to, but I wonder if they could. Over the last few decades, we've seen our police turn from community-based policing into more of an occupying army, militarization of police. That happened very gradually, also the police surrendering their autonomy. But when the response to COVID came, it was like it just went into overdrive. And we had police officers handcuffing visibly pregnant women behind their backs, which is just a no-no. I go on for hours about that, for the egregious crimes of watching their son playing hockey while being unvaccinated, for pushing their 3-year-old daughter on a swing in a closed park, and for in Quebec City, walking down the street without a mask out in the open. And these women were brutalized. You don't handcuff pregnant women behind their back. You don't do that. That's like lesson number 1 in use of force, first day of police college. And yet, there we go, 200-pound thugs, dressed as military, paramilitary. Oh, we had evidence in the Bruce case. One of the officers described the Ottawa Police that he worked for as being a paramilitary organization. So this has infested our law enforcement throughout Canada. It's been coming for a long time, but it just went into overdrive. Police officers in uniform can stand there and they can be members of the community that protect everyone, uphold the law, keep people safe, protect lives and property. Well, but at a certain point, whether in uniform or plainclothes, they can be a political force enforcing political agendas, and that's exactly what has happened to our police services in Canada. They no longer operate with under the rule of law and without influence so that everybody can trust them and depend on them. I don't know how we're going to get back. I don't know how we're going to get that back. But when we see police officers and organizations taking sides, doing surveillance on people who are our political opponents, when we see the police ordering the banks to seize bank accounts, freeze bank accounts, stop credit, destroy businesses, homes, lives, you can't get a mortgage anymore. When we see the police doing that to put forward a political agenda and please the political masters, we're in big trouble. And yes, we are. So my answer to you is, if the police are there to monitor you about what you think and what you say and how you're in opposition to something peacefully, then yes, tremendously intimidating, and it may well be done for exactly that reason. This is the case of Detective Helen Bruce. She's an Ottawa police detective, and she's charged with discreditable conduct for initiating an alleged unauthorized investigation into a cluster of unexplained infant deaths in the Ottawa area. Now, Detective Bruce developed this investigation in about December of 2021 into January 2022 due to her suspicions that there was a possible connection between the unexplained deaths of 9 infants and the mother's vaccine status, whether or not they had the COVID vaccine. And, I will lay out the factual chronology, but at the end, it's a leadership problem. Top down, I don't know how we're going to fix this in policing, but I know that Detective Bruce is being railroaded, and the question we should be asking is, why did they stop that investigation?
Donald, why did they stop that investigation, in your professional opinion?
In my professional opinion, it was to deter any other police officer in this country from launching an investigation into how these mRNA vaccines were developed, licensed, distributed, mandated, who made money, who mandated it that made money. And as we've seen, the evidence in the last 4 years, it just keeps coming. So Detective Bruce is a message to other police officers in Canada to stop them from investigating. And it's worked. So I'm appealing. Every police officer who's watching this, and I know there's many of you still on the job, you've spoken to me, many off the job, but it takes less courage when you're off the job. All those police officers who know what's going on, do your duty. Obey your oath of office. Regain your authority and your autonomy. Because right now, you've surrendered it. In September of 2021, Detective Bruce wrote a lengthy and widely distributed email to the Chief of Police and her colleagues. It's about 3 pages long, and it forms part of the evidence that I put in today, the exhibits. In that email, she asked questions, including about the efficacy and adverse effects of the, quote, emergency use authorization vaccines, unquote, which were in the process of being mandated at that time, September 2021, in the Ottawa Police. She also asked, quote, would the Ottawa Police Service take full legal and financial liability for any injuries, adverse effects, and or deaths occurring to members following the receipt of any emergency use authorization vaccine potentially mandated, unquote. For asking that, for writing that, she was sanctioned officially and by other officers. Her immediate supervisors ordered her to never talk again about COVID vaccines. This in the unit that investigates unexplained infant deaths. Ordered never to talk about COVID or the vaccines again. She was ostracized. She was spied upon. They sent out instructions to other police officers that they were to be with her only when another officer was present so they could collect evidence if she broke the order to not talk about COVID or the vaccines. The Ottawa Police Service knew what Detective Bruce knew that there was a spike in deaths, knew that there was a cluster since the vaccines came out, and knew that instead of 1 in 600, they had 2 in 6 weeks infants that died in their mother's arms. That was known. Detective Bruce examined the SACA files for the investigations that had been done for the 9 deceased infants. Now, Detective Bruce had not been assigned to any of those. We heard evidence, and it's quite true from my background, that you can look at, as a police officer, you can look at any reports, throw out anything if you have a reason, a legitimate reason, and Detective Bruce did. 2 dead babies in 6 weeks is a legitimate reason for looking into those 9 infant deaths. The tribunal allowed a prosecutor's conflict of interest. The prosecutor from the from the Ottawa Police Service, one of the main witnesses is her sister-in-law. And when that was announced in court, the entire gallery gasped, because if that happened in a criminal court, that would be it. The charge would be thrown out, and both the prosecutor and the judge who allowed that would be under investigation.
Can I just stop you?
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure I understand. So you mean the officer that is acting as, we'll call it not the judge, but what are they called? Are they?
Okay, the prosecutor is a lawyer, part of the legal team. They're an employee of the Ottawa Police Service Legal Department. The prosecutor is a lawyer. Her name is Vanessa Stewart. And the judge, if you like, the trials officer, the adjudicator, several names, he is, I'm sorry, I'm gapping right now. In any event, he is Chris Renwick, a retired police superintendent from the Ottawa Police. And so he serves as a would-be judge. He has no legal training. Most of his cases are maybe an officer got drunk and on duty and is pleading guilty. This case has been going on now for some 20 days of hearings.
Right, but there's a connection between the prosecutor and the adjudicator. Is that what you're saying?
No, between the prosecutor and one of the primary prosecution witnesses, who is a police officer named Stewart. So we have the prosecutor Stewart and the witness Stewart, who are sisters-in-law.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. No, that's really not something you allow, because it just appears to be unbiased.
Right.
And prosecutors actually have a duty not to get a prosecution, but to put all evidence fairly forward. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, and the agreement was that the girls wouldn't talk to each other when they went shopping or a barbecue or dinner about the case.
And we're getting down to about 1 minute.
All right, fair enough. But there was also the prosecutor weaponized objections, especially when defending her sister-in-law, and it just goes on and on and on. Expert defense witnesses were not allowed, and this is really something. On November 26, 2023, hearing officer Renwick rejected all 5 defense expert witnesses 4 out of the 5 because they were associated with or testified for the National Citizens Inquiry, and that included yourself, sir. The names are Dr. Eric Payne, Dr. James Thorpe, Dr. Gregory Chan, lawyer Sean Buckley, and Ottawa Police Staff Sergeant retired Peter Daniluk. None of those witnesses were allowed. It was said that they were biased because they put in statements that defended Detective Gruce. For instance, Dr. James Thorpe had expressed opinion that the Ottawa Police Service should be investigated for their political prosecution of Detective Gruce. So no testimony from James Thorpe. Sergeant Daniluk.
That was in
Sorry?
James. That wasn't a public statement. That was a statement in his affidavit in support of Constable Gruce.
That's correct.
Right. So it's not. He's not being disqualified for anything he says in public. He's being disqualified for voicing something in an affidavit in those proceedings.
Yes, all these people put in affidavits and were rejected because of the anticipated evidence that they were going to get. Staff Sergeant Daniluk was rejected because he said that the disciplinary system is being used against Constable Gruce and leadership failed in not investigating the media leak to the CDC. So no testimony from him. Lawyer Sean Buckley, quote, was a moderator at the April 26, 2023 National Citizens Inquiry and put questions to a witness, a former RCMP Corporal Daniel Bulford, on Detective Gruce's actions and charges. And also Dr. Eric Payne and Dr. Gregory Chain were witnesses at the inquiry. So none of you are allowed to give defense testimony, whether or, I mean, you believe what you said, you swore it in an affidavit, but that was disallowed. And we can go on and on and on. I believe that this case is critical for 2 reasons. One, we had an experienced senior detective investigating on reasonable suspicion, reasonable probable grounds, a cluster of 9 infant deaths that were so unusual, 2 of them, that not even 1 in 600 had been seen before. And she was wondering about the connection between the vaccine, the mRNA vaccines, and these infant deaths and the mother's vaccine status and breastfeeding. And the Ottawa police shut that down without getting those answers. And number 2, I'm thinking of police officers and their lack of integrity and their lack of courage for standing up. Their independence has not been taken from them. They have surrendered it. Their authority has not been taken from them. They have surrendered it. Quick story, Police Sergeant Harry Darcy, my squad leader back in the 80s, was told not to touch any of the vessels in Toronto Harbour that were operating without a liquor license. They were operating as gambling dens, brothels, drug distribution units. One that operated with the triads, with the Chinese triads, organized crime as a gambling den with a brothel downstairs, was owned by a member of provincial parliament in Ontario. And Sergeant Darcy, he got so much pressure, it ended up he was in the office of the Chief Jack Marks. And Harry Darcy said to the Chief, you can transfer me, you can fire me, but you can't order me not to enforce the law and to do my duty. Where are those police officers today? If Detective Gruce were here, I'd ask her to stand up.